Join me tonight on Twitch and YouTube at 9 p.m. Eastern, where we will play NFL Trivia for cash prizes. Link to play below. And now, on with our feature presentation. I think many people would agree today that the New England Patriots are one of the model franchises in the NFL. It's a highly successful franchise that on the surface seems incredibly well run and seems properly managed, to the point where Robert Kraft has solidified himself as being one of the best owners in NFL history, thanks to his ability to spend money whenever and wherever necessary to ensure a good product both on and off the field. And the results have paid dividends, to say the least. The team has won 6 Super Bowls, which is tied for the Pittsburgh Steelers for the most in NFL history. The team has won 11 AFC championships, meaning that roughly 1 out of every 5 Super Bowls in NFL history that have been played have featured the Patriots in some capacity. That is, by far, the most in the NFL. And the team has made the playoffs 28 times, thanks in part to some really solid and competent ownership in the past 3 or so decades that, like I said before, is willing to spend money. Because in the past, yeah, the Patriots did not do that. Because while Robert Kraft is an owner that doesn't cheap out on things, Billy Sullivan, as in the first owner that the Patriots ever had, he was not like that at all. Sullivan cheaped out on so much that even Mr. Krabs from SpongeBob thinks that he went too far at times. The same owner that charged people for breathing. There are tons of examples of Sullivan being a poor owner and cheaping out and not knowing or doing whatever it took to win. However, if you want a prime example of that, especially one that you might not know about, let's flash back to this season right here, which was the 1965 AFL season, when the New England Patriots were known as the Boston Patriots, and when they were one of the worst teams in the league. Partly because Sullivan decided to do something absolutely inexplicable that more than 60 years later deserves a deep dive for just how insane and just how stupid it is. Billy Sullivan's cheapness led to an incompetent offense beyond belief, and an offense that physically could not function. And this is the story behind what has to be, considering the circumstances, the stupidest offense in the history of the Patriots franchise. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, we need some context to understand how the Patriots were doing before Sullivan decided to make his move. Because it's one thing if the offense was bad, Sullivan stepped in and did something to change things up, and then the offense stayed bad. However, if the offense was good, and then Sullivan's interference in the dumbest way possible caused it to be bad, or was at least responsible in some capacity for it, then yes, this is a completely fair argument. And as you can tell from these highlights of the Patriots on offense in 1964, they were actually pretty good. In 1964, even though the Patriots did not win the AFL East, thanks to the Buffalo Bills finishing the season at 12-2 and completely tearing apart the rest of the league, the Patriots had the second best record in the league, going 10-3-1 and ending the season by winning 5 of their final 6 games. And a big reason for the success of the Pats in 1964 was, as you can see, the strength of their offense, which finished 3rd in the league in points scored, scoring 365 points over the 14-game season, or an average of over 26 points per game. That was only 35 points behind Buffalo for the top total in the league, and only 1 point behind the San Diego Chargers for the second best total in the league. This was a team absolutely loaded with all-stars and all-pros, as of the 11 stars on offense, 5 of them were named either an AFL First-Team All-Pro, an AFL All-Star, or both, with those 5 being center John Morris, guard Billy Neighbors, flanker Gino Cappelletti, fullback Larry Guerin, and arguably the best quarterback in the league that season, Babe Parilli, who led the AFL in passing yards and in passing touchdowns. This was a smart offense that had the fewest turnovers of any team in the league, and this was a team that in nearly half of their games scored more than 30 points. Long story short, the Patriots, on offense, knew what they were doing. And in 1965, they were essentially going to run it back on offense. The starting lineup was nearly identical offensively, and all the All-Stars and All-Pros returned. The head coach returned. Everything was good to go for the Patriots in 1965 on paper. And yet, in 1965, as you can see, that was not the case. Not at all. Because everything about the Patriots in 1965, especially on the offensive side of the ball, was ugly with a capital U. In fact, you could argue that the offense was the reason that the Pats were good in 1964, and why they were terrible in 1965. There was no change really to the defense. The defense went from allowing 297 points, or 21.2 points per game, to allowing 302 points, or 21.6 points per game in 1965. So there was no difference. But the offense? Oh man, the offense. Because the offense went from scoring 365 points, or over 26 points per game, to scoring just 244 points, or 17.4 points per game. Not only was this the worst offense in the AFL, but this wasn't even close, as the next closest team, the New York Jets, scored 285 points, or 41 more points than the Patriots. The Patriots were closer to first place in 1964 than the next closest team was to them in 1965 when they were in last place, if that makes sense. And if you want a chart illustrating just how bad the Pats were offensively, well, here you go. Because as you can see, the Patriots weren't just bad offensively in 1965, they were historically bad. What you're looking at right now is the point total of every offense in AFL history up until that point. So from 1960 to 65. And right inside the bottom five is, you guessed it, the Boston Patriots. Just abysmal. And it gets even worse when you break it down even more. Because again, the Patriots were a very good offensive team in 1964, but not so much in 1965. From 1964 to 65, the Patriots went from 365 points scored to 244 points scored, meaning that they lost 121 points from year to year. Again, let's look at every team from 1960 to 65 in the AFL and their point difference from one year to the next on offense. Usually, each team stayed within 50 or so points of what they did the previous season. So if a team scored 300 points in one season, you could expect that the next year, they would score somewhere between 250 and 350 points. Again, that was a pretty safe bet. But the Patriots were one of just two teams, alongside the Houston Oilers from 1961 to 62, to lose more than 100 points in a given season. That is abysmal, and the Oilers at least have the excuse of scoring 513 points, an AFL record, in 1961, and then dropping to 387 points in 1962, which was still the second best offense in the league that season. So they went from historically great and unstoppable, and maybe the best offense in AFL history, to just one of the best in the league. The Patriots went from great to putrid. So that raises the question, what gives? What's the reason for the drop-off on offense? As you can clearly see through all these lowlights, if the players stay the same, and if head coach Mike Hollaback stayed the same. Well, you can thank Billy Sullivan and his royal cheapness, because you're not going to believe what the Patriots decided to do offensively in 1965. You see, in 1965, Billy Sullivan, whether it was by his own choice, or because he got into some heavy financial trouble, or a bit of both, decided to be cartoonishly cheap. I think it's probably by his own choice, because the AFL was set to make a boatload of money with the Miami Dolphins coming in 1966. All of these stories by themselves could be videos down the line, but let's just touch on some examples. In 1965, the Patriots were the only AFL team that did not have a doctor on road trips. Seriously, they did not have their doctor travel with them, meaning that multiple players, including Larry Eisenhower and Jack Rudolph, were bruised prior to a game against the Buffalo Bills, and could not take Novocaine to heal. The Patriots had the fewest scouts of any team in the AFL, having just one full-time scout at a time when teams like the Denver Broncos had 7. The one full-time scout, by the way, was Ed McKeever, who was the general manager but got demoted, even though the Patriots said that he did a fine job. For his reward of doing a fine job, his salary got slashed by $5,000, going from $14,000 to $9,000. The Patriots were the only team in the AFL that did not have a director of player personnel. The Patriots refused to fly to games until the day before, even if the game was on the West Coast, because they didn't want to spend on hotels. And the Patriots had the smallest taxi squad, or practice squad as it's called today, in the American Football League. All these things, by themselves, are really cheap. Said one writer on all of this, it costs money to keep a taxi squad, hire a complete coaching staff, travel first class, and establish a good scouting system. There are 22 teams in pro football, with 14 in the NFL and 8 in the AFL, and 21 of them feel such things are a necessity and not a luxury. But of all the cartoonish levels of cheapness that the Patriots decided to implement in 1965 under Billy Sullivan, when it came to the offense, this was the worst. This was the stupidest and most laughable of the bunch. Because you see, the Patriots, who boasted the smallest coaching staff of any team in the league, unlike every other team in the AFL, did not have a coach who was responsible for signaling plays in for the offense. In 1965, the Patriots just decided to do away with that. How most operations work is that you have a coach upstairs in the booth who is responsible for calling the plays and signaling them down to the sideline and the quarterback. You see it today, with the offensive coordinator upstairs calling the plays, and you saw it back in the 1960s. It's a tried and true formula. And unless you get a situation where a quarterback is responsible for calling all of his own plays, a la John Elway during one particular game for the Denver Broncos against the New York Jets, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, that's how it works. And the Patriots decided, screw that. We don't need a system like that. Which raises the obvious question. Who called the plays? Well, they had a man upstairs in the booth handling the phones and phoning downstairs as to what the plays should be. That man, Charlie Green. Charlie Green was the one responsible for calling all of the plays, manning the phones, and running the offense. The only problem with that? Charlie Green was the team's rookie quarterback on the taxi squad. That's right, a freaking rookie quarterback on the taxi squad, and a 13th round pick nonetheless from Wittenberg, was the one calling all the plays. Not an offensive coordinator, not another coach, seeing as Sullivan cheaped out on that, a freaking rookie quarterback who had 0 pro experience, and who wasn't even with the team half the time, because the Patriots, in an effort to get him some more playing time, had him playing minor league football with the New Bedford Sweepers in the Atlantic Coast Football League. This is like having a hockey player play in the ECHL to get some playing time, and then manage all the line shifts and call all the plays for his NHL team when he's not in the ECHL. I mean, you understand how ridiculous this is, right? I want to give you a modern-day football comparison just to further illustrate how absolutely stupid this was and how laughably cheap this was. This man right here is quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He was the 10th quarterback taken in the 2023 NFL Draft, much like Charlie Green was the 10th quarterback taken in the 1965 AFL Draft. Although Green was taken in the 13th round with pick number 103, while Thompson-Robinson was taken in the 5th round with pick number 140. And Thompson-Robinson played college football at UCLA, a Division I school, while Green played college football at Wittenberg, a school that, at the time, had not produced a professional football player since Dutch Miller all the way back in 1931 for the Portsmouth Spartans. So even though this is somewhat comparable, in many ways, it's even worse. Anyways, imagine if this man, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who got drafted by the Cleveland Browns this year, was the team's de facto offensive coordinator and was upstairs calling all of the plays. But now, imagine that the XFL decides to move to a full schedule to compete with the NFL, and Thompson-Robinson, feeling as though he's not going to get a ton of chances to play this year, as he might be buried behind Deshaun Watson, Kellen Mond, and Joshua Dobbs on the depth chart, decide to sign a contract with the DC Defenders of the XFL and plays for them at the same time. So he's playing second-tier football and then calling NFL games with no guidance whatsoever from his coaches, being thrown into the fire in an figure this out sort of thing. How absolutely ridiculous does that sound? Well, in 1965, the Boston Patriots did just that. The Boston Patriots seriously did that, and either thought it was a good idea or thought that this was a good and efficient way to not spend money. Spoiler alert, it did not work. It backfired heavily, as the team not only had the worst offense in the league, and not only had the second worst year-to-year offensive drop-off in AFL history, with a giant asterisk next to the first one, but they were tied with the Houston Oilers and the Denver Broncos for the fewest wins in the league, with 4 wins. Good job, Pats. That really worked out for you. I also want to add that you might think that, well, if Charlie Green ever played for the Patriots and became a really good quarterback for them, that in the grand scheme of things, as disastrous as this 1965 season was, then you know what? It was a net positive. Trial by fire and whatnot and learning the hard way, even though this was clearly not what this was meant for, and this was just a case of owner Billy Sullivan being super duper cheap however he could. Well, Green never played for the Patriots. He played in 1966 with the Oakland Raiders. He threw 2 passes. He never played another down to professional football after that. And he is so obscure and forgotten today that he doesn't even have his own Wikipedia page. So, yeah. So much for that theory. Good job, Pats. This is one of those things that, considering the money that pro football teams make, and considering how important and how vital having a play caller is, I can't ever see happening again. Any owner that has a rookie quarterback on the practice squad upstairs calling the plays with no other coaches around him will be forced to sell the team on the spot for not fielding a competitive product and for being dirt cheap to the point where it ruins the integrity of the Shield. But in 1965, apparently you could do that. Because in 1965, when it came to the man calling their plays who was thrown into an impossible situation, the Patriots found out that it wasn't easy being green. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.